Males who got sexually harassed, what's your story? Please like, subscribe and comment so I can create more videos for you. I remember in high school, I was in the hallway by myself. A girl that had a crush on me came up to me, and just kind of quickly flashed me her tits. Bad timing, because the assistant principal had just turned the corner, and saw her do it. I thought she was going to get in trouble, until the AP grabbed me instead, and told me that I sexually harassed her, and will need to fill out a police report. I was very confused, I didn't know what I did wrong. I tried explaining the situation, but the AP wouldn't believe me. She kept saying I forced her, and coerced her into doing it. It didn't help that the girl's mother came up to the school, and was trying to push for them expelling me, and she kept calling me a rapist. Luckily, my stepfather was called, and he flew down to the school. At first, he was pissed at me, believing the AP, but I think after a bit, he realized I was telling the truth. My stepfather demanded the tape. Tape showed everything that happened, and my stepfather absolutely lost his shit on the AP. Even got escorted out by security, lol. Ever since then, the AP still treated me like some kind of rapist while I went to school. Most confusing thing that ever happened to me in school. Not sure if that counts to what stories you want, but it was a pretty traumatizing experience. I went through a phase where I just assumed I could take blame for anything, at any time, regardless of the truth. Had to go on a one-night Boy Scout camping trip when I was about 12. None of my friends were able to come, so I didn't have a tent mate, so they stuck me with this older guy. He was around 19 years old, but he was slow, so they let him stay in the Scouts and I didn't really know him. About an hour after lights out, I wake up to him spooning me with an erection and wandering hands. I kinda just froze hoping he would stop, but after a minute or so I pushed him away and bolted out of the tent. I ended up just pacing around outside the tent for hours till the sun came up. I really wish that hadn't been my first sexual experience. I left the Boy Scouts a few months later. 19 years old, absolutely zero reason to let someone who had already hit 18 to stay on. The troop itself is pretty fucked up if they're letting guys stay for 2 years on after they officially age out. It's called Boy Scouts, not adult, but kinda slow, so it's okay Scouts. That dude is a straight pedophile and the adult leaders are absolute dipshitter for pairing a kid and a literal adult in a tent. There was this awful kid in high school, but my friend and I didn't know how bad he was at the time. My friend, his girlfriend and I were hanging out after school, and the kid asked if he could hang with us too, so we said why not. We played We're over at my friend's house and I laid down on the couch while my friend was in the bathroom. I closed my eyes, not sleeping, just chilling. This kid took out his dick and thumped it on my forehead. My friend's girl and I yelled at him. Never hung out with him again. It came out later that he had raped a girl the summer before this happened as well. I used to work in a grocery store. One of the cashiers was openly into me. Whenever I had to go through her line, she would refuse to ring me up unless I'd agree to go on a date with her. Lots of customers and other staff laughing and egging her on. It's a weird type of powerlessness, because of the switch genders and how everyone else was reacting. Confusingly humiliating. I was a manager at the time, and had to have a conversation with her manager about what was happening. It stopped soon after. What the actual fuck was she thinking? What the fuck were the others thinking? This is why I'm so mad about women saying that OHH, men can't be sexually assaulted bullshit. The fact that you need to take this to management and can't deal with it between you two is pathetic. And I honestly think that those assholes who encouraged her are total douchebags. Bet the majority of them weren't males. Bartending, it happens. All sorts of stories, but it comes with the territory, to an extent. I put a stop to it pretty quickly when it crosses a line and bring in security if it doesn't stop, and have the offenderess escorted out of the bar. Worst instance was at a private event where both of the hosts cornered me in the basement laundry room and tried to take off my cloths. They were grabbing my crotch the whole time and trying to pull out my junk. So, knowing they were both pretty drunk and I can decisively overpower either of them, I de-escalated the situation and defended myself. One of the hosts ended up in the laundry tub. His fat ass was stuck in there after I tossed him, and the other were locked into a storage room and barricaded the door with a tool car and shelving. I didn't get paid, but they also didn't have a bartender for the last 3 hours of their party. What do you mean you didn't get paid? That's not fair. It was a self-defense. They're lucky you didn't report it to the according authorities. Tired and stranded at Denver Airport as an 18-year-old trying to fly home from college. The airport was nearly completely empty and it was in the middle of the night. I was exhausted and fell asleep on a bench only to wake up to an airport janitor with his hand in my pants. I immediately sat up and pushed him away. He was smiling and saying something in an Eastern European accent. I left the area and went to the other side of the terminal, but I was so tired I fell asleep. Again and again woke up to this same creep groping me. This was in the 1980s before ubiquitous cameras and there were no cops around. Not that I would have been able to tell. I was embarrassed and traumatized. I can still see his creepy smile and I was so angry and afraid. Jesus, that is awful. And not even anyone to report to. I am so sorry, dude. That guy should be in jail. What a fucking creep, and to be so bold I bet you weren't the first or last. Worked behind a bar. One woman in particular always inappropriate, which grew louder the more she came in and the more she drank. Weirdly it was in front of her husband and daughter, also drunk. She was 50 plus, daughter was 16-18. Dart. Escalated to physical grabbing, groping and at one point yanking my tie and pulling me toward her. Luckily the bar taps were too tall and the bar was too wide for her to get close enough to do anything. Also groped in a supermarket once, didn't even see who did it. I don't think I'm even attractive. I was like 5, 6 years old and some relatives had visited us. With those relatives was one of my aunts that was like 40 years old. Long story short, she asked me if my dick has grown and I didn't say anything, so she put her hand in my pants and touched it. I don't remember my reaction then, but I remember everyone laughing for some reason. Edit. I wasn't expecting this to get so many comments because that's my first comment. Also this isn't a big deal, at least for me, and I don't feel like a victim, but I know that's sexual harassment and my siblings freaked out when I told them. Also she was a step-aunt not an aunt, sorry for my English. Also I am a Greek not a nation. I was on a streetcar tram. When I got on there was still plenty of seats, so I sat down. A couple of stops passed and all the seats were taken. I saw an older woman without a seat struggling, so I offered her my seat, which she kindly took. Her stop was before mine and she had to pass me, still standing, to get off. Instead of just passing me, she stopped, made eye contact, winked and grabbed my private parts. It only lasted a few seconds and then she got off the streetcar. I was literally frozen in disbelief and didn't really react to it at all. Was at an outdoor concert when a middle-aged woman backed up into me and started dancing and rubbing her ass on my crotch. I backed up, and she backed up into me over and over before I told her to stop. I turned to my friend and started talking to him when she basically put me in a headlock and started trying to make out with me. I struggled to get free while my friends laughed and took pictures, videos. Those pictures and videos then got sent around our friend group and I got made fun of for making out with an old, fat woman. Edit. To those saying I should ditch those friends. Some I did, some apologized. I'm not one to hold grudges for the most part. I was at a party and, later in the evening, the hostess and her friend pulled me to the floor and tried to unzip my pants to measure my penis. One of them had a ruler. It was actually a struggle to break away from them. They thought it was funny. I did not. Edit. This was back in the late 80s. A different time. I never gave a thought of being sexually harassed or assaulted, but I did feel kind of humiliated and uncomfortable after. They were part of my circle of friends. I was pretty young and they were a bit older. It was a struggle to break away without hurting them. I was concerned about being seen as the aggressor. Both of their husbands were there, but I don't think they knew this went down. There were a lot of people around, but it was kind of dark in the house by this time. It's been over 30 years and I haven't seen them in a long time, but I still remember their names. This fills me with so much unbridled rage. I've had similar but less Excessive experiences. More than a few times I've either experienced or witnessed a girl grab some dude's junk to see how big he is. It's not sexual harassment, because she doesn't wanna do anything with it, it's just a laugh. By the time you've gotten their hand away, they've already gotten a tight squeeze in and can loudly proclaim to the room as to what size package you are sporting. Had a girl in social study rub her chest in my face while I was sitting up against a wall and couldn't move away. I tried to push her off me, which of course made her laughing friends tell the teacher I grouped her. I hate that girl, and no one's figured out why, even though there was a classroom full of people who saw it. Edit. I'm not saying no one figured out that she was assaulting me, everyone just seemed to forget about it, as if this wasn't a big deal. Girls can be perverts as well. My freshman year in high school, a girl asked for my help in algebra. She grabbed my hand and put it on her pussy for me to play with. I wasn't harassed, but it did catch me the fuck off guard. It was not terribly serious but was uncomfortable. When I was 19, my boss, a woman in her 40s, was going through a pretty nasty divorce which had its roots in the fact that her husband had been having an affair with a much younger woman. On several occasions when she and I were the only people left in the office at the end of the day, she mentioned that she'd love to fuck some young college guy because it would help her get over the trauma of her husband's cheating. It seemed pretty apparent that she was asking me if I wanted to go bang. It never seemed like a terribly serious issue though, because that was never coupled with any kind of comments about my job security. My interpretation was that she literally just wanted to have some hot sex with a young stud and I was the only young guy she knew. I always just kind of ignored the comments or made jokes about it and then got out of the office as quick as I could. The more serious thing was that I once got passed out drunk at a party. There was a girl at the party who had a crush on me, but I was in no way interested in her. I woke up in the middle of the night to her giving me a hand job. Man, I get startled easily when I wake up. Even if I ask my wife to do this, I'd still probably freak out and accidentally hit her with a knee or something. A messed up kid in my school raped another guy and said that the guy he raped him. Poor kid got expelled for being a victim. This whole thing went down at a party and someone said so and so was having sex in the person's living room, so we went to say go get a room. We heard someone saying stop it and we rushed over to break it up. An investigation went down in the school district and the cops got involved. That's when the chief of our PD said at school to drop it because the victim's parents paid off the detective that was doing the investigation. The whole thing was wasted, and no charges were pressed. I edited this BTW. The first 3 lines were original, but I added the rest because I was getting the same questions, so I thought I would clear things up. 15/16 years old, was in my first serious relationship. She was emotionally unstable, manipulative, won't go into details, but we had an argument and I left her in my bedroom. When I came back, she had used my razor to cut her wrists and wipe blood on my bed, saying if I didn't fuck her right then and there then I didn't love her and she had no reason to live anymore. She's healthy and happy now, and I have forgiven her for everything. We were young and she was sick. But unfortunately forgiveness doesn't cure wounds, and it's ruined my sex drive, to the point where it's completely non-existent almost, which causes issues. Namely, I want to have a normal healthy sex drive for a 22 years old man, desperately, but can't seem to get excited anymore. Makes me feel inadequate as a male, so I lift weights instead. It's all a healing process. In the nicest way, please see a therapist. She has left you with some major trauma that you should have help working through. You are not inadequate for not getting excited. Your body is associating turned on with what she did, so of course doesn't want to play. As great as it is that she's done some healing, you need some too. I was at a friend's house for a party getting to know some girl I just met. My friend and his buddy are renting this house with another woman and her 16-year-old daughter. Late at night, that mom gets drunk and I hear her daughter screaming at how the mom always tries to fuck her friends. People start leaving and mom's at the door. I said goodbye and as I'm walking out she grabs my junk from behind by reaching between my legs, like an uppercut. I just kind of hopped up and squealed and fo ASAP. I feel sorry for the daughter. How constantly embarrassed she must be all the time, and for you as well. I was at a bar that was my regular watering hole, and I was bent over the counter talking to the bartender. It was loud as fuck and we needed to hear each other. I have hair halfway down my back, and was bent over with my shoulders rounded and half hidden under my hair. Some fucknut decided to grope me, thinking I was the woman. He grabbed my ass and rammed his fingers into my taint, right where one would expect to find a vagina. He didn't. I was not amused, but he nearly shat himself when the woman he groped turned around and was a 6'3" very angry man. I let the bouncer know, and he kept an eye on him and ended up throwing him out later. Oh man, I am a male and I used to have long hair. The amount of times I got catcalled and then had some moron get mad at me just because he can't handle the fact he liked my booty was absolutely ridiculous. I got a ride from a random guy. He started touching my chest and offered me some money to have sex with him. Then he offered me a job. I asked him to stop and got off at the next town. But it was really awkward. I did get somewhat happy in a way, because I'm handsome enough to someone offer some money to fuck me. I had some issues with my appearance, but now I know that the guy was just probably horny AF. Two situations. 1. I was 16 yo and working at my second job ever, pizza place, and the manager was 19 yo. She made it clear that if I ever wanted to do anything other than wash pans and dishes that I needed to service her. 2. I worked at Walmart back in 1991 and there was a much older, 40 plus, woman. I was 20 yo, that would always find ways to rub against me and hint at wanting to give me experience. I had forgotten about both experiences until the Me Too thing hit on Twitter and women said men had no idea what it was like to be sexually intimidated in the workplace. Thank you for sharing. And this shows this shit can happen to anyone. You did not deserve it, no one does. I was working as a CNA, certified nursing assistant, in a medically approved daycare for children 2 WKS 12 years old. These kids had severe physical and mental disabilities. I worked alongside 15 females, all nurses, in what should have been the most professional and safe work environment. I quickly learned that some women can be just as horny and disgusting as guys can be. Walking into work each day I had walk by every nurse station and would get catcalled every day. Every damn day. At first it was awesome. I mean, what guy doesn't fantasize about a group of women all over him? But it quickly grew not only irritating, but grew more and more offensive and over the top. It started off with, oh yeah, here he comes. Let's see what he's wearing today. Or, he's so cute I just wanna pinch that ass. I genuinely thought it was funny at first until one day as I walked in, one particularly gruff nurse said, I wanna see that dick. For whatever reason, I was seriously offended deep down and told them all as such. It stopped after that, but damn. You have complete and utter full rights to be annoyed at them for doing this to you. If they made you uncomfortable, it is their fault. When I was a teenager I had a condition in my testicles, varicocele I think. Basically varicose veins in my balls. I was having multiple doctor visits etc. To figure out a solution, I ultimately ended up having them surgically removed. Anyway, it was common for me to need to take my pants down and the doctors take a look. During a visit to a specialist, the nurse, a 20-something brunette female said okay, let's have a look, so I didn't think twice and I dropped my pants. She grabbed me and said provocative things like you must be proud and then left. It wasn't until later, when the doctor came in and asked to have a look, that I realized something was off. I informed him no worries, the nurse already did. I watched the color drop from his face and he left the room immediately. Only then did I realize it was even inappropriate, and it took years for it to sink in what I actually experienced. Teenage boy pretty clueless. I hope she was fired. That's how a lot of abusers get their victims though. It doesn't mean you were clueless. You trusted a medical professional. To make this short as possible, I'm a B man. I went by this guy's house. I was about 22. I had met him one time before when a friend of mine brought him to a party. I figured if he was a friend of my friend he was okay. I get there and go to the bathroom while he fixed drinks. So I come out of the bathroom. He has drinks fixed. I drink about half of mine. And knew I was fucked. He had spiked my drink. Once I was unable to fight back, he carried me in the bedroom and raped me. Unfortunately I wasn't completely asleep, so I knew everything that went on. He was bouncing on me so hard it felt like he was intentionally trying to hurt me. It felt like the bed springs were stretching all the way to the floor. He finally finished, and a little while later I was able to get up and get dressed. I went home and hid in the back of my closet, inside a secret compartment until the next morning. I decided that no one could find out. I just couldn't let anyone know. So I decided that I would just forget that it happened. That way I didn't have to tell anybody. That's what I did for about 10 years. I finally broke down while doing an inpatient visit to a mental hospital, because there was a 18-year-old girl coming after being raped, and couldn't accept it. So right in the middle of a group session, I couldn't take it anymore, and just blurted out, if I as a man can admit I was raped, there's nothing you can't tell. She looked at me a minute and asked if I was serious. I said yes. She ran over to me and hugged me, and cried, until she finally admitted what had happened to her. After that I got counseling, and all is relatively good now, so. I'm sorry for what happened to you, but I'm glad you used your situation to help someone else in need. Was at a party with friends. They were all 16 and I was 17. We were all drinking and for most of them it was their first time. I waited until things calmed down a bit before I started to drink more. We were all staying the night, so I went to the couch to pass out, but a girl got on it with me. I didn't think much of it as she had a girlfriend. When I fell asleep I was fully clothed but woke up a bit later and I was in nothing but my boxers and still drunk. The girl was grinding on me and had put my hand up her top. The others were all asleep and I whispered, "What are you doing?" She whispered back, "I want this," and proceeded to take my boxers down and start jacking me off. I was so drunk I fell asleep again, and in the morning I woke up and dismissed it until later that day I find out she told people that I raped her and everyone believed her. As I write this I'm sitting in school a year later and still get horrible looks from people who used to be my friends. I feel like a monster for just being a male. I actually had a couple of friends get accused of rape by the same girl in high school. Although the sex was consensual, she cried rape for attention, and then admitted about a year later that she lied. Both my friends had to be admitted into the system as registered sex offenders anyways. I don't know if they fought it since then, as I haven't been in touch with either of them in years, but they were both good guys, and neither deserved what happened to them. I'm sorry the same thing has happened to you too. Edit. Grammatical errors. My dad. I was an underage teenager who just discovered masturbation. He came into the bathroom when I was in the shower doing that, opened the curtain and demanded I continue. I told him I didn't want to, and he kept insisting, to my increasing discomfort at having my father violate my privacy and watch me standing there naked and asking me to jerk off for him. I'm in my mid-30s now and I have no idea if he even remembers this, but I hope he does, because this is exactly why I've distanced myself from him. I don't make a huge deal out of it, but I get groped by girls pretty frequently in crowded bars. It's never anything dramatic, but my arms or ass will get grabbed while I'm trying to walk through. It's just so weird to me, because I'd never grab some unknown girl's ass, so it blows my mind how comfortable they feel doing it to me. I honestly just laugh at the ridiculousness of it, because nobody would give a shit if I complained. First time was a high school trip to the agrodome, because watching sheep get sheared is what passes for entertainment education in NZ. Anyway, everyone went to school with that one girl that I'll call Herpes because it explains everything about her. Herpes decides to pop a molly before getting on the bus and spends the next 2 hours of traffic following me around the bus and grinding on me as my friends laugh. I am 99% sure that she stole my wallet during all the grinding as well. Second time, I had just finished a couple of 3-hour exams at uni and was pretty tired, so I was just staring out the window when a girl came and started trying to start a conversation without using her inside voice. I ignored her, which was rude. I know, but I was tired and hoped she would take the hint. She didn't. Instead, she full on shoved my head into the window. That one wasn't technically sexual harassment, I guess. Last time the bus is empty when this old woman comes and sits next to me. To my policy of just ignoring everyone on the bus and expecting the same respect, I didn't say anything to her. Next thing I know, she puts her hand on my inner thigh and smiles at me as I jolt up. Because the bus is empty, I just decide to sit somewhere else, but she isn't letting me out, so I have to sidle past her, and as I do, she full on grabs my ass and makes honking noises, then laughs hysterically as I finally make my escape. Told me her gag reflex was as absent as her daddy issues. I declined that advance immediately. Would then call me husband until I informed her that 2 specific forms of my name were acceptable, as in A or B. She didn't understand, thinking I was telling her that one was better than the other, as in call me A, not B. Finally understood after I repeated myself firmly. I almost took the problem to management, but didn't want her punished, just to get the hint. She was terminated for poor performance and incompetence shortly thereafter. Women around me know that I don't like harassment from either gender, and I'd never put a woman in that situation. To have it done to me was infuriating. Mine's a really long story. I had a stalker for 5 years, who made me jumpy, and I'm not a easily intimidated guy. I was in an open relationship. My GF was showing a friend of hers my nudes. Wasn't uncommon of her to do. Gay friend of hers sees and makes a comment asking for my number. She thought it would be funny and gave it to him. He texted me and I just told him, hey man, I am flattered, but I don't go that way, and assumed that would be the end of it. He spent the next 5 years texting, calling me every day, sending me nudes, offering me $500 minus $700 to just let him suck it, and would show up to my classes, my place of work, even my mom's house in another city. To try and find me, he used his security clearance as he was military. Every time I got a new phone number, he would have it within a week. Every time I moved, he'd show up at my new apartment to welcome me. He was also 6'8" and jacked to the gills. Very intimidating guy to have knocking on your door at 2 AM because you said you were going out of town this weekend. I didn't know what to do. I didn't think anyone would take me seriously, as I didn't feel I was nearly attractive enough to warrant a stalker. It wasn't until I started dating someone seriously and told him I was going to get the cops involved that he stopped. I was raised entirely by women and was already pretty sympathetic, but that experience really opened my eyes to what some women go through. To try and find me, he used his security clearance as he was military. Every time I got a new phone number, he would have it within a week. I know a guy in the military who met a woman online, had a few email and phone conversations with her, and then used LexisNexis to get her address. He left a vase of flowers on her doorstep on her birthday. He had no idea why she said no thanks, cut off contact, and deleted her dating profile. He legitimately thought she'd be impressed or flattered by his creepy ass behavior. Most of 8th grade, 2 girls would take the same bus as me. One day, I wore shorts, and for some reason they wanted to touch my leg hair. Weird, but I didn't stop them. Kept doing it every day. Slowly grabbing closer to my crotch. Started trying to stop them. Told them I wanted them to stop. They didn't. Pushes their hands away when they tried. They kept trying. Smacking their hands when they tried. Never stopped. Went to the school about it. Nearly got kicked out for hitting another student. Tried talking to cops. The officer I spoke to was one of their uncles. Told to me enjoy it. Fast forward to 2017, and the Me Too movement. I dared to mention that 2 girls tried to grab my crotch. Got harassed off most social media for it. That's so $%ed. The whole Me Too movement just made me angry. There was a lot of trolls which made other men not want to speak up, but also some women have this outdated concept men can't be sexual harassed, raped. So it was the Me Too as long as you're a white middle high class female. I hope one day, another movement will come along that is truly about equality, and then the healing can finally begin for everyone who has been hurt. I'm sorry those girls hurt you. You never deserved that. You deserved to be helped by the cops. You deserve to be heard. I had an old school friend visiting me in London, and she invited me to her auntie's house for a party. Most of the guests were 40 plus and I was in university, the same age as the girl who invited me. The party was very fancy, in a huge Chelsea mansion. Lots of expensive wine, champagne etc. At one point the girl's auntie gave me £100 to pick up 2 bottles of wine from the shop next door. I didn't mind. I was just grateful to be there as a poor student, haha. Dart. Anyway, I drank excessively and ended up crashing in one of the many spare bedrooms in this mansion. When I woke up, the girl who had invited me to this party was in the bed with me, sort of spooning me but with her hands in my underwear and massaging me. I imagine trying to rouse an erection out of me. I was not into this at all. I in no way was sexually attracted to this girl and her personality was a bit too abrasive for me too. Fuck, I shouldn't have to justify this. So I pretended to still be asleep, coughed and rolled onto my front so that her hand slipped out of my underwear. I never said anything but I made sure to never see that girl again. I still wonder if she knows that I know. So being the only gay person in my year in a posh private school, I often get a lot of harassment bullying for just being gay. One time I was mid-changing in the changing rooms and some boys pinned me against a wall and one started dry humping my ass. I was only in boxers. It lasted for about a minute with all the boys laughing and jeering until I broke free. I now have to change in the disabled toilets. When I was 12, my family and I went on a trip to a summer club with a friend's family. This family had 2 girls 5 years older than me and a guy 7 years older than me. One day, my parents left me with Mark, the father of the other family, to do grocery shopping with this Mark's wife. I was on the pool talking with the 2 girls when Mark and this guy, which is 7 years older than me and way stronger, called me to go to the sauna with them. I can't remember it all. It was just 3 of us there. They removed my swimming trunks and started to say some disgusting stuff. I started to cry as they were cornering me. They made fun of me, my body and the way I looked. I was too skinny back then. They started to touch me and after what seemed a decade someone else entered the sauna and they got scared and left me. I never told anyone but my current girlfriend about this. When I was younger, I had a girl I work with pin me up against the wall and grabbed my ass and said some lewd things to me. I had no confidence at the time, so I didn't fight back. I just kind of froze, feeling very helpless. I did not want it. I was not comfortable. But the really disturbing part is that guys see so little interest normally that I actually ended up treasuring that memory, and that's not okay. Even now it's a mixed memory, and I don't like that at all. I'm much older and I'm confident around women now. If that happened today, I'd shut it down fast, gently but firmly. And NBSP. Something people forget is that most guys get so little attention from the opposite sex that we sometimes welcome even unhealthy things because bad attention can feel better than no attention at all. But it's all still bad. I'm Scottish and wear a kilt to all different events and places. I've lost count of the amount of times I've had women put their hands up my kilt for a feel, lift my kilt up and also shout at me for not letting them see what's underneath. The worst was probably when I was standing at a bar waiting to be served and a middle-aged woman came up behind me and tried to jam her finger up my asshole, then got angry when I wasn't happy about the situation. She got thrown out by the bouncers, but the amount of complaints by her friends was absolutely appalling. This will likely get buried, but here's my story. We were in high school together. I was a freshman and she was a senior. Our choir class went to see a musical at the St. Louis Fox Theatre. During the first half of the show, she kept putting her hand on my leg. I whispered, "Please stop doing that," but she kept doing it. She then moved her hand up my leg and grabbed my crotch. I slapped her hand and told her to stop again. The guys sitting behind me thought it was hilarious and had made jokes about that incident even to this day. After that incident, there were other instances where she kissed me without warning, and then she showed up at my parents' house uninvited and without any advance notice. She tried to invite herself to our Thanksgiving dinner. After we had kicked her out, we saw each other again at school. I told her to never talk with me again, and if she ever came to my parents' house like that again, we would call the police. The only people who took my harassment assault seriously were my parents. Everyone else, even some teachers, thought it was a joke. I posted this one before, copy pasting. This was in my last year of high school, 18 years old. There was this huge line in school's cafe every lunchtime. And even though it moved quickly, if you came late enough, you could easily wait 10-15 minutes. When the bell rang, my friends quickly rushed there, but I was asking my teacher a question, so I get there late. So I had like 100 people in front of me while my friends had already gotten their meal and were going to their table. While waiting I was sort of thinking about stuff without paying attention, and walk a bit forwards every time, like anybody in a long line would do. Then suddenly I startled when palm of a girl in front of me touched my dick, through trousers. It wasn't like holding, but it was just a little bit longer than touching for a split second, so it was weird. It happened a few times in a row. She was like swinging her hand while not looking. I touched her shoulder to make her look and said her hand was touching me. She apologized then smiled at me. I was relieved. It was just a mistake. Then she did it again. It was too weird to be a mistake just a minute after I warned her. Then she started flirting with me. After starting talking, I immediately understood that there was something wrong with her. Like not psychological issues, but at neurological level. We had extra quota for disabled people in our school, and at that point I was pretty sure that she was disabled, which people confirmed me later in that day. She wasn't retarded, she was taking normal classes with other students and was able to handle them. But I don't know how to explain this, but why was just way too weird. It was like she wasn't getting any clues and had no self-control or shame. She asked me if I was good at math and asked me to meet and teach her someday, while briefly grazing my penis like every 15-20 seconds. When I told her to not do that, she would just giggle and do it again after 10 seconds. When I was already pretty stressed, she said she wanted to sit with me and hang out. When I said I was going to sit with my friends, she said number. At that point I started to get terrified. I felt like I was trapped and had nowhere to run. If someone said something like this would happen beforehand, I would just laugh it off and think that it wouldn't bother me at all, but it wasn't like that. My hands were literally shaking. At the end of the line, there were several personnels, so that multiple people could get food at the same time. I got my food faster than her even though she was in front of me in the line and rushed in an almost running pace to my friends. Friends asked me what happened after seeing my pale face. I explained the situation and they immediately understood. They knew her. I had transferred to this school, so I was the new guy. Apparently she had touched other male students' dicks in the past as well and get away with it just because she was disabled. This was the time my suspicions were confirmed. Just a girlfriend of mine showed me some empathy while others were laughing their asses off. I was trying to eat my soup, but nothing would be left on the spoon when it reached my mouth because of the shaking. That one particular asshole sitting in my right that I called him friend shouted that girl with her name. She looked at him, and he shouted Santa West said he loves you, and started laughing frantically. I cursed him, immediately got up and jogged to my classroom. After coming home, I told this to my then GF. She first laughed for a few seconds but then got angry and showed me the reaction I was seeking. This was something bad that happened to me and it wasn't a laughing matter. That was also the first time I realized how gender swap in these situations would make things seem entirely differently and changed my worldview quite a bit. This had no long-lasting effects on me and I'm completely fine at the moment with no traumatic stuff whatsoever, but I don't think I will ever forget this. I was the only white kid in my school at the very bottom of Texas where the population was 98% plus Mexican American. The girls loved me, and the guys didn't for quite a while. When some of the girls in 5th grade that were in gangs and shit started to hit puberty, they started being handsy with me. I already got a ton of attention every single day at school because I had colored eyes, rather than brown, but it got more annoying around this time. Girls started grabbing my ass, telling me they wanted to suck my dick, touching my arms, touching my eyes, asking me if I wanted to fuck in the bathrooms at school and shit. It was embarrassing because I didn't like it, but a lot of guys I knew started to think I was conceited because I got a ton of attention from girls and didn't like it or would turn down blowjob offers and shit. There were always accusations of racism whenever I did anything wrong. I didn't want a fucking blowjob in the back of our 5th grade bus home. I wanted to go home and watch DBZ and continue my Age of Empires 2 games that lasted days. Shit was gross. I remember once during a night out with a group of friends about 8 years ago, my ex-girlfriend couldn't quite accept the fact that I now identified as gay. So she proceeded to, out of nowhere, shove her hand down my trousers to try and find Mini-Me. She followed me into the men's toilets, and when I asked someone to get her away from me, she punched me in the face. She was suffering from incredibly bad unmedicated bipolar at the time, so I don't blame her for being erratic, but it was terrifying at the time. I've heard she's much happier and healthier now and has been in a long-term relationship with another guy for a few years now. As someone with really bad unmedicated bipolar disorder, that's still a bit out there. This was fairly recently, as in last couple of weeks. Well-known music festival, watching a very high-profile band, a specific number of aeroplane drivers. This girl, and I assume her BF, stood next to me and started getting a bit freaky. She then starts grinding all over my leg. I step to the side. She then follows. This happens a couple more times before I catch her eye and make a disgusted face. She then becomes offended, so I walked away. Nothing like some of the other stories here, but that got to me. Had that been reversed, I'm pretty sure there would have been fireworks. Reddit sleuths, I'm going to take a shot in the dark and say it was 21 pilots. Not sure why that was secret info. Oh boy, this one still stings a bit and has definitely left a mark, albeit more professionally than emotionally. This could get long, so be warned. I'll have to provide a bit of context here first. I started uni a bit later than the average, at 22, and already had 5 years of work experience, including working abroad. I was used to long hours for bad pay, and as such, felt like the assignments or mandatory reading materials were fairly easy and low effort in comparison. Needless to say, finding preparation for classes relatively easy and having the time to put in the work has put me in a position where I generally answer teacher questions more frequently than my classmates, and I genuinely enjoyed most of the topics or courses. Political science major. I started uni as a regular paying student due to my mediocre poor high school grades, but made it to the top of my class by the second semesters. One of my professors, who held several courses during my 3-year education, developed a sort of obsession for me. She was in her mid-30s, and while I found her interesting to listen to and easy to respect, she spoke 7 languages and was one of the few professors that had a sense of humor and generally wasn't dry in her teaching method, but otherwise I didn't find her attractive at all. She was unmarried, but was having an affair with another faculty member, who also taught classes for my group in later years. She was also a favorite and protege of the faculty dean, so was generally well regarded and well connected. I was working part-time as a bartender to support myself during those years. During our first summer break, she stumbled upon the bar I worked at by accident. I thought nothing of it and was happy to serve her. She said my mojito was the best she's ever had, which sounds flattering, but the bar was mostly a student watering hole and I wasn't that skilled of a bartender, so it felt like an exaggeration. When she started showing up weekly and only during my shifts, I started to suspect it wasn't because the mint I was rubbing was so damn fresh or tasty. By the time the second year started, I was starting to catch on and feel uncomfortable. In retrospect, I guess you could sum it up as stalking already. I started to feel favoritism during class, and more red flags were popping up. At some point during the second year, she invited another good student, female, and myself to a dinner at her place, under the pretext of discussing more on our future dissertations, which she was assigned to as our guiding professor. My classmate, let's call her B, was dating someone at the time, so she showed up with her partner. I was single, so I showed up by myself. B and said teacher were close and also friendly, so I didn't think too much of it, but as the evening progressed and dinner had been consumed, B and her otherwise fairly dull partner were getting ready to leave. The professor, let's call her L, suggested I stay a bit longer as it was still early and we hadn't gone over much in terms of my paper subject. I was already fairly aware of the situation and where things were going, but seeing that she had the power and authority to influence my education, I was afraid of doing anything to jeopardize my future. So, As B and her partner left, L got straight to the point, starting off with confessions about how much she loved me and respected me and the whole shebang. We were sitting on her couch, and she proceeded to try to get on top of me. I literally had to pick her up. I'm not muscular, and she wasn't light, but adrenaline is quite the steroid I guess, and put her down next to me. To try to damage control, I bullshitted my way out of it with lies about how I have someone else, and I can't do this, and other nonsense that I can't really recall. My rejection of her didn't go down well, and it made classes following that extremely awkward. She wasn't deterred though, and her advances and stalking continued well into my third and final year. I probably should have graduated just from managing to stall her for so long without getting myself expelled or on the shit list of the entire academic staff, as she was very well regarded. It took a level of bullshit and diplomacy akin to what I imagine most politicians to possess. During my third year, it had gotten so bad, I was actively changing shifts at work just to try to make sure she doesn't find me there. At some point, she made up a whole contrived story about having terminal cancer and leaving me everything she owns, including her flat, to me in her will. It was about that time I decided no degree is worth that shit, and finding a new job in a different city in the country, I moved away from my hometown entirely. For my final semester in the third year, I used relocation as an excuse to be able to give my final exams with other teachers. I went back for a 2-week period to go through them all, and passed them, but I couldn't have my dissertation project reassigned to another teacher. Thus, while I passed all courses with more than enough credits to graduate, I didn't end up doing so, skipping the dissertation examination and my own graduation ceremony. The entire ordeal left quite a mark. 6 years later, and I still don't have my BA due to it, one of the bigger regrets of my life. I live in a different country now, and have moved on, but interestingly, she somehow got a hold of my phone number and has reached out again a couple years ago. I finally had the courage to tell her to fuck off and blocked her number, and haven't heard from her since. With the exception of a couple very close friends, I haven't really talked about this to anyone. I went to therapy for it for a while, but it didn't work for me, on top of costing more than I could afford long term. On the plus side, it has given me a whole new understanding of what many women go through, things that rarely get mentioned or talked about. At least in this regard, I feel like I've come out slightly better from it all. But yeah, sexual harassment sucks. I am really afraid to post this here because I don't want someone who knows me IRL to connect this to myself, but here it goes. I was 13 years old and had this 40-year female teacher. Anyways, after a couple of months of her teaching she started making some weird comments about me. There's chemistry between us, you have such pretty eyes. Dart. My friends used to tease me but I never thought much of it because she was weird generally so I didn't make a fuss about it. Then at one point she asked me and another student if we would like to compete in her subject. That required some additional preparation, of course. One day my friend couldn't come to those additional classes and I was alone with her. She started making really weird comments and petting my head and just generally she was close to me the whole time. At one point she put her hand on my thigh and started being RLY to hand C with me. Fortunately when she started doing that I reacted immediately and told her to stop. She said that it was okay and that it is perfectly natural for us to be that close. After that ran out of the classroom. I didn't tell this to anyone ever before this. The worst thing is that she still teaches and the principal of my elementary school is probably aware of this problem but doesn't want to get her in trouble or some shit like that. Anyways, this is my story. I looked back in my post history for this and am proud to see how far I've come in the 2 years since posting. For anyone else struggling, please seek help. It's no cure, and it's not easy, but it's worth it. I still struggle, but I'm not struggling with it alone. She was my best friend. We had hooked up off and on for a while but for the year prior to the incident we were just friends. I was in an LDR at the time. Then one night she got me drunk. Watched a couple good music documentary movies. She pushed for what she wanted and I said number. She kept pushing and I kept saying number. Then she started kissing and pressing herself into me. I said no again. I said I didn't want our friendship to change. Because I didn't. I guess at some point I stopped saying number. We ended up dating for a few months after. I don't think I could deal with what happened, and she was a friend I cared deeply about. I miss having a friend and wish I could talk to her about what happened and how much it hurt. Went on antidepressants for a year and to Rain for support. Still struggling with it. Fuck. I was drinking at my place with a friend. I'm getting hammered and we learn my friend, who is also a neighbor, is throwing a rager, so we go and crash it. We show up and drink some more and I'm on the verge of blacking out when I get sick at their bathroom. So I call it a night and my friend walks me back home and one of the guys at the party walks back with us. This party was full of very homosexual furries, as it turns out. The guy who followed us back was very handy and bitty, and honestly, if I wasn't with my friend I probably would have been raped. My friend told him off and I got home safe, but I've been a lot more cautious of the liquor since then. I get all kinds busking, which I do for a living on a busy, drunken street in a busy, drunken city, so it happens on a regular basis. That said, I don't answer to management, so I deal with it case by case. To answer your question, there's no single story of that one time I got harassed. Women can be just as handsy in certain environments, especially when there's an implicit power dynamic. Their eyes grow wide with surprised indignation when I start yelling at them to move the fuck on. In the mid-80s to late 80s I was a very good distance runner in the MPLS area. I was a small guy, 5'7", 130 pounds with a very built physique for a distance runner. It was frequent that gay men would drive up to me while I was running and say all sort of lewd things to me. One great episode actually saw a man enter a public restroom stall and hover over me as I was taking a $$ at and ask me if I'd like a butt ram. On a few occasions the males threatened me with rape. Lovely stuff. Interestingly and probably not surprisingly, the worst of the behavior was always when I was running alone. I've never told this story before. I don't have an alt, so it's just going to go here. If you know me IRL, then you're about to learn something about me. When I was 12, I played a game of truth or dare with my best friend at the time. She was 13 and my parents let us hang out in the woods nearby. We used to build bases with dirt, wood and old discarded furniture. Nobody could see us when we were here, unless they came into the base area itself. It started off innocent for the first few weeks of summer. Stupid kid shit like, I dare you to lick the dirt. If I asked you to kiss me on the lips, would you? This obviously escalated over time. One day she said, I dare you to kiss my butt cheek. Without going into details, I did. My round came and went, and then it was her turn again. Do you touch your willy? I replied, number. My turn passed. Her turn let me touch it. She pulled down my shorts and started to touch me. It felt weird. I had my first erection that day. I didn't want to be touched, but it admittedly felt quite nice. I didn't speak to her for a week after that challenge. Her dad and my mum were friends, however. They met fairly frequently, and when they did, they insisted we disappear. So we went back to our forest base. Today's dares got heated fast. Shorts down. Touch. Next dare, let's have sex. I tried to say number. She asked if it was because I was gay. She grabbed my penis and kept going. She pushed me onto a mattress we had in our base. A spring dug into my shoulder, and then she sat on me. That day she forced me to lose my virginity. Honestly, it was horrible and I can replay the scene in my head to this day. Insisted you disappear. They were banging. The daughter knew and thought it's what she should be doing. When I was 7 or 8, one of my cousins forced me to lay down. Proceeded to lower my pants and his, then rubbed his dick against my butt. This happened several times and always threatened me to never say anything. I never talked about it until the issue came up almost 30 years later while talking with my wife about sexual harassment we both suffered. Something similar happened with a neighbor. He forced me to masturbate him. It was around the same time as when I was abused by my cousin. It happened twice. I was a dumb kid for not telling it to adults. This is the main reason I respect women. What I went through is just a small thing if compared to what women have to deal with. Fuck sexual predators. Being forced to handy a guy at 8 years old is no small thing compared to anything Why must a guy minimize their suffering because women get it worse? Nah. It's far closer to the truth that men just don't talk about it and are far less listened to. I will try to tell my story, but please excuse me if it is poorly written. English isn't my main language. This happened roughly 2 years ago. I was 18 at that time, and had a tutor for the Russian language. He was an older man, I would say around 60 or 65, and I like him. He was nice, he complimented me a lot and all in all, helped me build up a little bit of self-esteem. I should have seen it coming. He often asked me if I wanted to go to the sauna with him and stuff like that. Well, one day while he was at my home and helping me with Russian for school, he started lightly slapping me on my knee. He did this a lot with me throughout the year I have been working with him, so I didn't think much of it, but his hand started wandering higher every time until he started massaging my crotch. I can't really tell you why I didn't stop it there, but it became a usual addition to our private lessons. I wish I could write more about it, but I suppressed all of this until very recently. I used to work as a photographer in a nightclub. I can tell you, no, being in the thick of it, sober and alone, is scary. At least once a week if not more. I work 3 nights a week. I would have some guy or girl try and kiss me, squeeze me and fondle me. Some nights it was happening a lot, other not so much. The issue is, I never felt safe at work. Quite often what they did hurt, physically, but if I were to say anything they would bitch at me, and sometimes the manager. I never got any sympathy because I'm just a guy, so I just had to smile and laugh through it like nothing was wrong. I still hate going back into that club, and I've not worked there for over a year. Let's see, I have a couple of them apart from being sexually assaulted. Go me. 1. Was on a public transport on a late Friday. It was almost empty. A guy came and sat next to me. I was a bit surprised considering the entire bus was empty, but thought nothing of it and kept listening to my music. The man sat in a position such that his hand grazed my thigh once. I didn't pay much attention to it and chalked it to accidental touching. However, a few minutes later he did it again, this time aggressively towards my crouch area. Again, not thinking much of it, I looked at him and politely said, "Hey, can you change the way you are sitting? You are accidentally invading my personal space and it is annoying." The man looked me dead in the eye and simply said, "Oh, don't worry, after annoyance comes the fun," and winked. I was literally dumbfounded for a second, but once what he had said registered in my brain, I sprang up. The man, seeing this, jumped up and, since the bus was standing on a stop now, left the bus in a hurry. 2. Was walking home through a very desolate area at night. It was my normal route as it was shorter. I was simply talking on the phone to my then girlfriend when a man approached me. He said something, but since I wasn't paying attention, I stopped and asked him what. He looked at me and said, "Would you suck my dick?" I was like, WTF no, and kept walking. However, the man started to follow me. His dialogues changed thusly: "Would you suck my dick for $50? Converted currency for ease of understanding. Would you suck my dick for a 100? Okay, fine. Would you let me suck your dick? Would you let me suck your dick for 50? I just kept walking faster and faster, and he kept following until I reached a populated area where there were shops. He was bigger than me, so I couldn't really instigate a fight. After that day I took the 3 kilometers longer path home. 3. A bit less aggressive was when a guy who was on a motorcycle started to follow me and my friend, also on motorcycle, asking me, "Hey dude, what perfume are you wearing? I want that perfume, etc." Luckily my friend was able to lose him, and that was the last day I wore that perfume. In school they used to call me gay all the time, which really annoyed me, mostly because it just wasn't true. I've had 2 incidents that went beyond that. Once, a dude grabbed my gooch, the bit between the balls and anus, when I was walking into a classroom at lunchtime. I yelled at him to fuck off. He said everyone does it. Bullshit. I don't think he ever said sorry. The other time, we were doing badminton in PE, and 2 of the other guys tried to shove a shuttlecock up my butt. I still had pants on, and stuck their badminton rackets there too. The teacher had to get involved. Didn't stop the first time either. These incidents don't bother me now, but man, some kids in school are total assholes. The irony is that they called me a straight guy, gay, but then would always behave around each other as if they were gay. And X200B, edit, reading this thread, it's really sad how two-faced people can be about sexual harassment and abuse. If a woman is being harassed, abused, everyone gets mad as hell, and even start marching down the streets in support. Yet when a guy is harassed, abused, he is laughed at, mocked, accused of being the abuser and not the abused, or ignored outright. Harassment is harassment, people. Saying men can't be sexually abused because they are men is like saying you can't be racist because you're black. It's just not how it works. I, 24M, had just denied my soon-to-be ex-GF, 20F, my dick to suck on. I was sick of her using sex to end convos that were critical of something she did, when this girl, 140-ish, straight up wrestled my 190-pound bulky muscular ass to my back, got my dick out and raped me with her mouth. The most absolute fucked up thing about it, that really fucked me up for a while and made me shrug it off, was that I went from soft to hard in nanoseconds and blew the biggest load of my life, to this day, in under a minute. I'm not into rape CNC roleplay or anything, but I definitely understand that shit from this encounter. There was a cheesy movie called SWF back in the 90s where this guy woke up to a psycho giving him a BJ. They nailed that shit. After about 10 seconds of resisting, your body just goes into shut the fuck up, this shit feels good mode and you just lay back and take it. Your dick literally takes control of your body, like a shark flipped on its back. Something immobility, ICR right now, but you're literally helpless. I still have anger issues to this day about that shit. I was raised to never hit a woman under any circumstances. Best believe I taught my boys that any unwanted sexual advances are any means necessary situation and that it's okay to physically resist that shit. I was going on a date with this guy, right? We were at the local Starbucks, having drinks and playing trivia. That's what my friends and I do on Fridays. Dart. I kissed him goodnight and went home. He asks to hang out with him and some of his friends the next day. I go over to the house. We're having a good time, playing some games. Eventually we get to 7 minutes in heaven, and we are both picked. We went into the closet and out of nowhere he grabs my precious bits. I told him to stop and he did. But a few hours later he did it again while we were dancing in the hall, and then once more he tried to go into the bathroom with me to give me a good time. Needless to say, I left him so fast. At the time he was 16 and I was 14 or 15. If you've gotten this far, thanks for reading. Have a great day. 3. I was changing the trash at my job and an old lady pinched my butt. I was young at the time, 16 at the oldest. Not quite sexual harassment, but when I was in my mid-20s, I helped a neighbor move furniture and she invited me over indefinitely to party with her and her 15-year-old daughter. Then she made a comment in front of everyone about her daughter having a dildo. I really couldn't wait to get out of that house. I helped another neighbor move furniture and she said since my birthday was coming up, I should come see her so she could hook me up. Never went to see her. Probably also not harassment. I went out to a bar on Halloween with my co-workers and a guy touched and rubbed my chest and biceps. I thought he was a friend of my group so I didn't do anything besides walk away. He was actually a stranger. I lived in a town in Kenya for a short while and I was the only white man living there under the age of 70. Once I went for a walk and 2 young Kenyan women started walking beside me and talking to me. One of them did the talking while her friend just laughed and encouraged her. She started friendly but her questions became increasingly personal as it went on. Eventually, I got uncomfortable and said that I needed to turn back. She then asked for my phone number. I said I didn't remember my number and would just take hers. She gave me hers and then told me to text her. I said I'd do it later. At this point she got really angry asking me why I wouldn't give her my number. Finally, she called me racist and said that I only didn't like her because she's black. I objected to this, but she continued on accusing me, so I turned around and walked away quickly. Edit. This has been really interesting. I think I understand how women feel a tiny bit more now. I am impressed by the dozen comments informing me that it technically doesn't qualify as sexual harassment. Thanks.